Welcome to Behind the Muscle podcast. Today's guest is an Ifbb Pro bodybuilder. Today's guest is Josh Wade. Josh, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Quentin. I appreciate you having me here. I'd love to talk to you about whatever we're looking into.
For sure. So Josh, I kind of like to kick the podcast off with all my guests by asking them a couple of questions just to kind of get the conversation going. The first question that I have for you is, who are a few of your favorite bodybuilders of all time?
Honestly, I mean, the number one bodybuilder I really kind of fell in love with and just following by like work ethic was Jay Cutler. I started competing in 2006, and I read Jay Cutler's CEO Muscle book before I ever started competing. Back when obviously we didn't have social media, so it was all magazines, and seeing Jay Cutler was tremendous. I mean, a big influence on me. I'm from Northern California area, so even before I ever competed, I saw Jay Cutler at a couple appearances. Always humble, always respectful. Great ambassador for the sport, but somebody that I wanted to be like. That was my biggest influence, I guess, into getting me into bodybuilding was Jay Cutler. Kind of during that same time frame, I read Dorian Yates' A Warrior's Tale book, and loved Dorian Yates' training philosophy. It was all basically all effort based. That's kind of the way that I trained. And during my competitive bodybuilding career, I got compared a lot to Dorian Yates, and that was, partially was the look, especially diet face, but also the grainy granite physique that just came from lifting heavy weights and beating up the muscle tissue for so many years. And then comes along, which came down the road, was John Meadows. John Meadows he became a brother to me. He was my coach. I knew him for 9 years. Coached me for about the last 6-7 years. We grew into brothers, and a big thing. Anybody that I ever followed, I'm a family man, and I believe in life after bodybuilding. So the health aspect was very important to me from day one when I started bodybuilding, which was over 14 years ago. John Meadows and I really clicked on that. Being cautious at every turn, everything that we could possibly do, to be the most competitive bodybuilder, but also believe in life after bodybuilding and make sure health was there, family priorities and balance. So, those three had the biggest impact in my life as far as bodybuilding goes.
Awesome. Now, I want to give you an opportunity. I kind of mentioned this before we hit record. You brought up John Meadows, and I'm a huge bodybuilding fan. I compete myself. I consume a lot of bodybuilding content, and I've followed John for a lot of years, listened to a lot of his interviews and podcasts. And I heard him numerous times say that you were the only athlete that he actually approached to say, hey, I want to work with you. And so, there had to be such a huge respect in terms of John for you, and then vice versa. So would you just dig a little bit deeper? I know you made a post on your Instagram. You did something for muscular development, but just for the listeners on this podcast, would you just touch on the relationship that you had with John beyond just the coaching and why you had so much respect for him, please, Josh?
Yeah, of course. It's still a little tough, honestly. But the first week after John passed was just such disbelief. Made you reflect on a lot of memories and a lot of these reasons. But so John, we competed against each other for the first time in 2012 at the North Americans. We competed in the heavyweight bodybuilding class. I finished second in that show. John finished seventh. I didn't know who John Meadows was at that time. But after that competition, I got a message from John Meadows on Facebook. So he reached out to find me, to send me a compliment saying that I was the most conditioned person that he's seen in a long time. And this coming from the man that was always the thinnest skin, hardest, grainy body type that I really have ever seen. So he reached out to me saying I should have won. I was in great condition. Just he went out of his way to compliment me, and he didn't know me. I didn't know him at the time either. So that went on, and then 2014 was kind of our next interaction at the Arnold Sports Festival in Ohio, where he lived. He approached me and said, I think you'd benefit from working with me. So he was in Ohio, I was in California. So a few days later, when I got home, I gave him a call. We talked for hours about a lot of stuff, about family, about priorities. And that's kind of right where I knew I wanted to work with him. We have very similar values, moral integrity. And that's something that means more to me than how far a coach could take me. So I asked him, why me? And he said, well, you should have already been there. Speaking back to the 2012 competition where he thought I should have won. And it was pretty much that was pretty much set. That's when I knew I wanted to work with him. And he said, pretty much the first thing he said, that was 2014. I was already working with another coach at that time. So I started using his training programs before I actually started coaching with him for nutrition as well. And went through his training programs and loved the structure of his training programs. But I was already contracted, already committed. I was working with the coach for the 2014 USAs. Then after that competition, I had a couple of injuries that occurred. I had a bone spur in my right shoulder that needed to be shaved down. It caused a hole in my labrum. That was September of 2014 after the USAs, where I finished fourth. And then the following year, March of 2015, actually tore the tricep tendon in my left tricep and had to get that tendon reattached, had to drill the bone, attach it through sutures. So there was a recovery period there. So obviously I wasn't doing John's training programs, and before I started coaching with him, we weren't in contact a lot. But then I thought after those two surgeries that I might be done. I didn't know if I would come back. I didn't know if I'd have the same strength. Doctors were saying I wouldn't. Then kind of randomly after the 2015 competition season, I got a message, got reached out to by Dante Trudell. Dante Trudell, owns True Nutrition, creator DC Training. I didn't know how big of a bodybuilding fan Dante really was, or how much he followed the sport. I knew of him through magazines, but I had no idea he knew who I was. So after that 2015 national season, I got a message from Dante saying, hey, I didn't see you this season. And this is after I was competing nationally probably for 4 years, finished, top 4 a couple times. And his message to me was, I hope you didn't hang it up. You're one of the most underrated amateurs in the nation. And he spoke with Dusty Hanshaw about me about that. And just hoped I didn't hang it up. And after getting that message, I realized, shit, I'm not done. I had a goal my whole life of turning pro. And after the injuries, I didn't know if that would happen. I was a top 5 amateur multiple times. But it was after that message that I reached out to John and said, John, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this with you. And first thing he said was, let's go win Team U. He won Team Universe after 30 years of competing at the 2015 NPC Universe show. He finally won the 35 and 40 overall and earned his pro card. And he wanted me to follow in his footsteps the following year and win the 2016 NPC Universe and turn pro. And we did that. We did exactly what he said. And it meant a lot for me to follow in his footsteps, turn pro at the same show he did. And after that, we kind of made history. That's kind of how it came about. But over the next 6 years, I grew a lot with John. Excuse me. And, I mean, it took me, I placed top 5 in almost every one of my pro shows. And everybody said that I wouldn't do anything. I turned pro as a master. Anybody that turned pro in a master's category is not going to do anything in open bodybuilding. Well, we proved them wrong. And number one was based on condition. John, I was always great at condition, but John always strived to have the most conditioned athletes. I mean, conditioning is something that you can attain. Size takes time. It takes time to build muscle tissue. But if you're willing to suffer, you can get in incredible condition. And conditioning is what wins shows. So that's how we kind of built my reputation. I had the granite physique that John always had. I finished top 5 in most of my pro shows, made the Olympia in 2018. I'm the only person that's ever turned pro in a master's category that's made the Open Olympia. So we made history there. And we just grew as friends. I mean, recently we didn't even really talk much about bodybuilding. It was mostly about youth football. He loved coaching youth football. I'm coaching my son for the 3rd year, his first year in tackle, but the first 2 years in flag. So, I mean, having other priorities really balanced out bodybuilding a lot more. It made everything a little bit more enjoyable when it came to bodybuilding because there was an outlet. It wasn't just bodybuilding. That's why we clicked so much and loved him.
Awesome. I appreciate you touching on Josh. I know it's still kind of hard, but I think it's been great to hear all the different people, athletes that have been impacted by John being able to open up and share, because I think that's what John would want. So thank you very much. I appreciate that. I want to transition here. I know we don't have a ton of time, but I do want to ask you, because it's always kind of interesting to myself and the listeners, what age did you start lifting weights, and what was the reason behind you starting lifting weights at that age?
Yeah, I mean, I lifted weights. I lifted weights in high school a little bit, but I was kind of a troubled youth. I grew up in a bad area. I fell in with the wrong crowd. My dad was union carpenter. He was out of town a lot. So I started running with peers and doing kind of bad things, running, doing things I knew I was wrong. I knew that was wrong, but I was trying to fit in. I was in a bad area, skinny white kid, and just trying to fit in. So it wasn't until weight training that I actually built confidence. So I got in trouble. I got in fights. I went to jail at 18. Actually got out of jail on my 19th birthday. And at that point I joined Gold's Gym. And that's back when Gold's Gym was the hardcore gym. Gold's was Gold's. And a bunch of big guys, bodybuilders. And I just, once I started training, I no longer tried to fit in. I no longer cared what anybody else felt about me. I felt finally for the first time a sense of self-accomplishment that I never had before, something I can do for myself to benefit myself, and see how far I can push myself. So I mean, it kind of gave me a goal and an outlet. And I mean, without weight training, I wouldn't have had the same confidence that I do now. It really changed my life. It definitely gave me a sense of self-accomplishment I never had before, and something that I want to see how far I can go with. I just really enjoyed it. Maybe it was taking out aggression in a controlled environment. No longer again caring what anybody else felt about me, just finally feeling good about myself, feeling like I had a path. I just kind of fell in love with it. And that's what got me into lifting weights. And then after I started bettering my physique and started seeing these guys in Gold's Gym that I it kind of admired to beat, I wanted to see where I can take my physique. I mean, I'm watching these guys and I'm super impressed. That's when I started kind of looking at bodybuilding magazines and everything like that. And was like, it just unbelievable. I mean, anything that you think is unattainable, but you want, if you're willing to to suffer and sacrifice and put in the effort it takes, I believe anything can be attainable.
Excellent. Now, when did you actually then start your competitive career in terms of bodybuilding?
See, that's one thing that I talk to people about all the time. You know, people start lifting weights for 1-2 years and they think that, oh, I'm ready to compete now. You know, I mean, like I said, I got out of jail my 19th birthday. I joined the Gold's Gym. I started training with weights. Well, I didn't compete till I was 27. So, I mean, you know, really, I had a good 7-8 years of consistent training and eating and building my physique before I ever even considered competing. I mean, also, I mean, I had balance, you know, I mean, I was a plumber. I wanted to make sure my career was set. You know, bodybuilding is an expensive hobby. You know, I mean, it's a sport, but it's still a hobby for most of us. Even becoming a professional bodybuilder still becomes a hobby. It's something that you have to love, because unless you're top, you're not going to be financially set for bodybuilding. So, you know, I mean, I always had my priorities in order. You know, like I said, I was a plumber. I started competing while I was plumbing, but I didn't start competing until 2006. Again, 7-8 years after I really started implementing nutrition and training. Built a solid physique. You know, I always felt like I, you know, looked good in a t-shirt, but kind of sloppy in a tank top at that point. And that's when I felt I was finally ready in 2006 to get ready for my first show, which I mean, I was up to about 220 pounds and I was strong. But once dieting down, I actually dieted down. 2006 was my first show. I did the Sacramento Bodybuilding Championships, November 2006. And I dieted down from 220 pounds to 173 pounds. I lost 47 pounds during those 15 weeks. And I won novice and open class, my first show, my first attempt. I over dieted because I didn't know any better. And I was willing to suffer and sacrifice. From my very first show, people started calling me the striated glute guy. They didn't even know my name. They just knew that I had striated glutes. And that was something kind of different back in 2006. But when you're eating turkey slices and celery sticks for most of your meals, that's possible. Again, over dieted, maybe wasn't as big as I could have been, but I won that show based on conditioning. Because again, conditioning is something that you're always in control of. Size takes time.
So I want you to touch on a little bit more, because I think this is valuable, especially for some of the younger listeners. You talked about how you talk to people all the time in terms of the importance of not just starting to lift weights and then jumping right into being a competitor or trying to do a show, but really laying a foundation and then eventually competing later on in the future. So just talk to maybe some of the younger listeners, or even people that are, you know, they've been lifting for a year or two and they're thinking about competing. Why is it important to get that foundation before you step into competition?
Well, I think there's a few things. Obviously, I mean, muscle maturity is one thing, but that takes time. You know, the more that you beat up the muscle tissue, the more it's going to have a dense look. The more you're not going to lose that muscle tissue when you do have to diet down to reach extreme conditioning. So, I mean, it takes time to build dense muscle tissue that's going to be able to be preserved when you're cutting calories, increasing cardio, getting ready for competition. Another thing is the mental aspect of it. Really, most of the people that are competing enjoy training. And if you don't have a love for training, you're not going to get anywhere, because you're going to be doing it for the wrong reasons, competing for the wrong reasons, not because you enjoy training and you want to see what you can do with your physique, but thinking it's going to give you some accolades or some kudos to jump on stage. And so the reason that you're training, which you don't have a desire for, is to compete. So wrong priorities, wrong order of events there. But the mental aspect of realizing how rigorous the diet is going to be if you're trying to reach extreme condition and be competitive in the show. A lot of people aren't mentally ready for that. And so that's why they have such a problem when they come off of a show and can't control their food intake and really start messing up their health or their physique that they dieted down so hard for. So, I mean, you have to be mentally prepared to know what it takes to get into competition shape. and be willing to do that, but also in mind, know that after you're done, you're not just done. You can't just go completely off and, you know, restore your fat cells with this extreme amount of saturated fat content, you know, kind of messing hormones in the same path, and then getting discouraged because you lost the shape that you worked so hard for. So now people endure a depression, and don't even know why. Obviously, you're messing with hormones. Your hormones start getting affected, whether you're natural or not. Once you get your body fat levels down really low, your hormones start getting really affected, starts messing with your mood, your psyche, your thinking. So, you know, I mean, I think it takes time to be prepared for what you're going to expect, getting ready for a competition. So, I mean, those are the reasons that I try to talk to people and make sure that they're ready and their priorities are in order. Because I mean, it gets tough towards the end of diet prep. And most people just see the Instagram posts and see what people look like, and they want to look like that, but don't really know what it takes. So, you know, take time, you know, even if it's talking to people, trying to figure out kind of like what it takes, what to expect when the feeling starts feeling funny, and, you know, you don't have energy to carry on your standard work day. You know, your work can't, you know, suffer or sacrifice. You need to be able to provide. So just, I mean, kind of the anticipation of what is expected, people need to really get a grasp on before they're like, I want to look like that guy on Instagram, you know? So those things, you know, keeping things in perspective, I guess.
Yes, very valuable words. Thank you. So I want to talk a little bit more, dive in a little bit deeper, Josh, in terms of like your competing, because I just think it's so awesome how, you know, like you said earlier, you turned pro as a master. You're the only person that was able to turn pro as a master and step on the Open Olympia stage. So just talk about your Ifbb Pro career. Maybe touch on some of the highlights, some of those experiences, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. You know, like I said, I mean, I trained for 8 years before I ever competed. That was back in 2006. Took me 10 years to turn pro after I started competing. So, you know, I mean, I think my first national attempt, I think was like my first national attempt was the 2009 Nationals. I shouldn't have competed there. I thought I was nationally ready. But again, as far as the psyche and the mentality, you know, I thought I was ready at that point, but while I was in preparation, you know, my wife and I, we lost a baby at 20 weeks, and man, the mentality of things, and there's always going to be things in your life, trials and tribulations, things that you got to overcome. But that was not more than like a handful of weeks before that national show, and I wasn't ready. You know, I mean, I should have not done it, but I already committed, and so it didn't turn out very well. The next year, 2010, I finally won my first overall bodybuilding at the 2010 Contra Costa. Jay Cutler was there again, big influence to me. Then that was my first year I did the USAs. And I mean, again, like a lot of people that, you know, think they're nationally ready and still end up tying for 16th place at a big national show. You know, an eye-opening experience. I can win regionally, but I still finished 16th at a national show. Yeah, you know, I mean, had some work to do. The following year, I realized, you know, I have a blocky waist, same as Jay Cutler. You know, after talking with Jay Cutler, you know, after one show, I'm just skipping ahead a little bit. After 2014 USA's, when I finished fourth, and I talked to Jay Cutler, and he said, how'd it go? I said, I finished fourth. He said, what'd they say? I said, they said I have a blocky waist. He said, they told me the same thing. So again, that's kind of like one of my slogans is outwork genetics. If genetically you have wide hips and a wide hip structure, you can only get your waist so narrow. So you have to build around that, build wider shoulders, etc. So anyways, after the 2010 not doing so well, I realized anytime that I'm going to try to suck down to a heavyweight, I'm going to beat by somebody with a wispier waist, narrower hip structure. So I was directed to just compete in the super heavyweight class. So 2011, I won the California State Bodybuilding Championship as a heavyweight. But then that was late May. So in July at the USA's, I was like, screw it, I'm gonna try. And so I went into the 2011 USA's, the year that Steve Kuklo won the overall and turned pro. I jumped in as a super heavyweight. I ended up finishing fifth, from finishing 16th the prior year to finishing fifth in the first time ever competing in a super heavyweight class. And Sean Ray even interviewed me that year and called me the dark horse. Nobody knew who I was at that point. I just kind of came up on the national scene and really got recognized in the super heavyweight class. I mean, he had me as top 3. I ended up 5th, great. And then the following year, I went back thinking I needed to be big, and maybe sacrifice my conditioning for the first time ever in my career, and drop back down to, I think, 10th at that 2012 USA's. And that's what led me into realizing, okay, this is not my best look. So I suffered down. I mean, I'm talking about really suffered through diet. I think my total overall fat content from the USA's in July to the North Americans in August was 13 grams of fat. And that was from oatmeal. So I pretty much was cod and egg whites. Not that my carbs were real low, but my dietary fat was real low. So, I mean, I think I went from 236 and I ended up weighing in at 219 at the North Americans in 2012. And that's where John Meadows recognized me for my conditioning. So, I mean, I dropped 17 pounds in the matter of those 6 weeks from already show shape, and was absolutely peeled. And that's where I finished second, and, kind of realized, okay, I mean, I need to just be a shredded heavyweight, because with my shape and structure, conditioning is the only way that I'm going to win the shows. It's not going to be based on size. I can't compete against the size of these other guys, but I can beat them in conditioning. So if they're not in shape, I'm going to beat them. So that's how, 2012 went. 2013 and 2014 both finished 4th at the USA's. Still, again, in the heavyweight class. Again, I even though I was the best that I possibly could be, made no mistakes, I was beat by somebody with a wispier waist in both of those years. Everybody had a narrower waist structure. I can't control. So then finally after that, when I started working with John Meadows, his training matched my body. We did a little bit different training. It wasn't necessarily worried about the load as much. It was about more of the control and the contractions. I was getting a little bit older again. I mean, I turned pro at the 2016 NPC Universe at 37 years old. So after beating up my body for 20 years with weights, my training did change when I started training with John. It was a lot more controlled. A lot more controlled on the eccentric, a lot more squeezing on the concentric contractions. So more constant time under tension, as opposed to just kind of increase in load like I did when I was younger. And that really matched my body. I mean, training, there are different types of training. I believe effort is number one, but it doesn't mean it has to be a tremendous load to put out that amount of effort. And that's what really changed my physique. I started getting rounder muscle tissue. That's kind of how it went. So after missing the 2015 season, coming into 2016, just hell bent on winning my pro card at whatever show it was going to take. Just happened. We started with the NPC Universe, and I turned pro at that first show with John. So it showed something that, I mean, a coach does need to match your goals or have a similar thought in mind. And after doing it for so many years, that's the good thing with John. John knew I knew what I was doing. And so he would ask me for feedback, or ask me how I felt, or ask me if I had any ideas. So, I mean, it wasn't just a coach telling you what to do. It was more of a camaraderie of us trying to figure out what worked best for me with my feedback. So he was a coach that listened, and that meant a lot more than just saying, just do what I tell you to do. So after I did turn pro, I won the 35 plus overall masters at the NBC Universe 2016. I turned pro. Just 4 weeks later, I did my pro debut. But again, after competing for so many years, like I talked about, once I turned pro, I was ready to be a pro. So I jumped in my first pro show. It was the Golden State in Sacramento, 2016. I finished 5th, my pro debut. Justin Compton won that show. Kevin Jordan was in that show. Ronaldo Gary. Some really good conditioned athletes as well. And that kind of made a name for myself. Then the following year, 2017, I did the Ferrigno Legacy. And I got 3rd behind Brandon Curry and Cedric McMillan. Again, conditioning is what put me on the map. It was, a lot of people had me even possibly beating Cedric. And that was my coming out party, I guess. After that is when I started becoming known and becoming watched. And then I think I finished 3rd, 2018, Vancouver. It was just based on conditioning. So the majority of my shows after that, the 2017 Ferrigno, when I got 3rd, earned me points. 2018 Vancouver, getting 3rd, earned me points. So I ended up making the 2018 Olympia on points. But still, obviously without top 5 placings in there, then there's no way that I would have made it. Some people had me winning some shows, which would have been great. But all that really mattered was I was bettering, I was improving. And that's what got me to the Olympia 2018. Went on, and I had some subpar placings kind of after that. I did win my last show, which was this last October 2020. The Legion Sports Festival, it was supposed to be an open bodybuilding show, which, because it's only 2 hours from me, it was kind of my home show. I really wanted to do, but they lost their sponsor, so they ended up having to lose the open men's bodybuilding and only had enough funds for masters men's bodybuilding. But I thought that might be my last show in advance, and so I was going to do it so that way I can have my kids in front of me. If it was my last show to compete, I wanted my kids there, and this was what I had planned on doing. And 2020 was a disappointment for a lot of people. I got an invite to the Arnold Sports Festival in Australia. That show got canceled 2 days before I was supposed to fly out. Then the Arnold in Brazil got canceled. So everything I planned on doing got canceled. So with that happened, it kind of put my priorities in order, realizing, okay, my kids are 7 and 9. They're at a great age to be able to do stuff with. And bodybuilding, we all know, no matter how balanced or prioritized you have your life, bodybuilding takes a lot of effort. It does take a lot of individualism as far as when to eat, when to train. So at that point, I was, considering being done. I talked to John even before that show. I was like, John, I think I'm done. My enjoyment was elsewhere. I still had the passion for it. But as far as my enjoyment, it was spending time with the kids, coaching their sports. Even as something as simple as having a meal with them. Yeah, I know, cliche, but can't really do that when you're trying to be amongst the top bodybuilders in the world. Not to mention at this point, there's a lot of younger guys in their upper 20s, lower 30s that are starting to put on more size than I feel like I ever want to. I feel like I reached my genetic potential, and maybe they passed me up now. So that's kind of what got me to current date, Quentin.
Love it. All right. I want to be respectful of your time. I want to ask you 2 more things here, and then we'll wrap it up. You said it took you 10 years to turn pro. Why didn't you quit on that road to your pro card?
I mean, yeah, I think with everything, drive and determination. Um, I mean, the resiliency to not give up. But I mean, because it wasn't necessarily, yeah, I wanted to turn pro, but I love training and I wanted to see how far I can push myself. So it's a pride thing, a pride that I know I could get better. I know I can improve. So it wasn't like I was really chasing this goal either. I was just on my way to this goal by doing things that I really enjoyed. Um, and I mean, that's why. I mean, the determination to not give up. I wasn't necessarily deterred that I wasn't winning, I wasn't turning pro. I felt like my physique was improving. I was still enjoying it. I was given everything that I had to try to benefit and improve from. So I mean, it's again, it's back to kind of that sense of accomplishment, knowing that my work did improve my physique, and I love the challenge. The challenge to always become better, and the drive to never give up. That's what you have to have inside your heart.
Excellent. All right. The last thing I want to ask you about, you've brought it up several times, but I want you to talk about your family. I think it's very, it's awesome and it's honorable when somebody is pursuing a career like as a professional bodybuilder that you did and you do, but they also are, an awesome parent and spouse. So just touch on, what your kids mean to you, what your wife means to you, and what it means to have that balance in your life, even when you're on the pursuit of greatness in your life.
Well, yeah, without my wife Shannon, I mean, I say this to people. I don't feel like anybody can have a better spouse. Not they can't have an equal spouse, but I mean, she has been so supportive of everything I do. She knows where my intent is. My intent is always based on family. So she never had to worry about being jealous or insecure if I was at a bodybuilding show or anything like that, because she knew where my heart was. I think that's very important to make sure your spouse or your partner knows that they are your world. That there's no doubt. I mean, if you go anywhere, because again, I mean, without that partnership, you're not really going to build anything. So she's always been super supportive of me. And then yeah, my son JJ now, he's 8. My daughter Sydney is 9. And they're doing football and cheerleading together. So I mean, they are my joy. They give me the reason to go home and forget about everything else. So I mean, the thing about, I feel like anybody that becomes a parent, your kids should be your number one priority. I mean, they need to have the positive influence. They need to know that they're growing up, and you're trying to teach them. Balance, courtesy, and respect. Teach them how to be good individuals, by giving them praise, showing them love. But also I also having discipline so that they are respectful, young people. So my priority has definitely been trying to raise my kids right, with the support and love of my wife. So I mean, yeah, I mean, with family, it gives you different joy in life, and it's something to always think about, building on. So I mean, yeah, I mean, I love my family. I don't want to miss out on anything. I mean, life is about really making memories. It's not necessarily about your accomplishments when you're gone. It's about the kind of person that you were while you were here. And these past couple weeks with John has really made me even think that more. I mean, it doesn't take any, I was always told it doesn't take any more effort to be a good guy. So, I mean, there's no reason to be an asshole. There's no reason to not be helpful. And that's the way that I kind of want to live my life. I want to be remembered when I want people to tell my kids, not that I was the best bodybuilder, but I was a good guy. That's what means the most, is how you're remembered when you're gone. So, leave the best legacy you can while you're here. Be as helpful as you possibly can. Leave no regret.
Awesome, Josh. So I just want to thank you very much for taking some time. I know it's you're 2 hours before me out there in California, so it's super early. So thank you for taking some time just to talk about your life, bodybuilding. John, if any of the listeners want to touch base with you or want to reach out to you, want to follow along your bodybuilding career, your family, everything that you've got going on, where can people find you? Where can people reach out and touch base with you, Josh?
Yeah, my Instagram is pretty easy. It's just at Ifbb Pro Josh Wade. Coaching football is like a full-time job on top of my full-time job, which is trainer, gym owner. So I'm not as present as I was on social media, but I'm still there. Priorities, things that are a little bit more important to me than, showing my physique all the time. I still train. I love training. I love eating like a bodybuilder. So my food stays clean the majority of the time, keeps me in shape. But I mean, that's the best way to still try to get a hold of me. If you need to, maybe you can go back and see what kind of bodybuilder Josh Wade was.
Excellent. All right, Josh, thank you so much. Listeners, thank you so very much for taking time to tune in and listen and gain great value in Behind the Muscle podcast. If you guys would just take this episode and do me a huge favor and share it on your social media platforms. That's how more people find the podcast, more people listen, and more people are positively impacted through the athletes, through the bodybuilders that are coming on to the podcast. And I will leave you all with this. Finally, remember, behind the muscle, there's always a story. We'll catch you guys later.